I'm telling you, like, it's not my job to school you. Like, you should have learned this in school. And honestly, it's a little scary that you don't know. Yeah, you're just putting me on the spot. You just want to embarrass me. And I'm to tell you this now. It's not going to happen, Brian. But it's not my job to school you on something that you should have learned in school. Women have been oppressed, and women still are oppressed. And Native American women as well. And
Native American women.
It's also Native American men as well. Aren't they oppressed?
I'm talking about women right now.
You're talking about women?
Yeah.
She says she doesn't want to educate and school him. By saying this, she does two things. One, she presupposes that there is something to educate and school him about, that she's right, even though she doesn't care to tell us why she's right. And two, she gives herself a higher position in the debate, that she has knowledge that he doesn't have. This is a deceptive appeal to expert knowledge. It's deceptive because she doesn't define or contextualize the term she's using.
And I'm just gonna say, it's not my job to educate you and school you on that.
Oppression is a loaded word, unlike a word like word itself. You can say good words or bad words. It's still words, and the root meaning remains the same. Oppression, however, is a dependent word. It depends on the eye of the beholder, and it varies from context to context. Thus, because it contains presuppositions and is context-specific, we should always question the word in a debate, and the speaker should always be able to substantiate it. If I told someone, "You oppress me," it wouldn't only be very strange and immature if I didn't elaborate, it would also be deceptive. However...
No, I'm telling you this, I'm telling you, like, it's not my job to school you. Like, you should have learned this in school. And honestly, it's a little scary that you don't know how women have been oppressed in the past. Because, like, this country was, like, built for men. And these, like, laws and rules, like, it's all to, like, for men, you know? Like, it was built for men.
The phrase, I'm telling you this, corresponds to the higher position she's given herself as the one who educates and schools. She repeats these verbs, hammering said position. In statement analysis, it's recognized that adverbs like honestly and to be honest are frequently used deceptively. In conversations, it's presupposed that you tell the truth, so why the need to suddenly emphasize that you're being honest? Unless you know that you're not being entirely honest, or haven't been entirely honest up until a certain point in the conversation. She's using every trick she knows to avoid accountability, not just in this podcast, but also in a previous one.
How?
If you don't know that, I'm not going to explain to you.
You
are part of the problem.
Did I ever say that?
You are part of the problem, and that scares me. That really scares me.
Thus, it's much more likely that she knows she's not being honest. The suspicions confirmed later on. She chooses subtle blame shifting instead, saying, or more likely pretending that she's scared. He doesn't know what she knows. What she doesn't tell us she knows, but knows, of course. She makes it personal and thus avoids having to explain what she means. Once again, this is unusual behavior. 10 times out of 10, if someone knows what they're talking about, they can't wait to school you about it, especially in a context like this. Because she's there of her own accord. She chose to go. She's been there before, so she knows what the podcast's about. This unusual behavior, coupled with another big but unsubstantiated claim, points to deception. When she sees that she doesn't convince anyone, it's time for another dishonest personal attack.
And like this podcast enough is showing me that sexism is still really alive.
This is the literal definition of an ad hominem. The speaker attacking the character or motive of another speaker, rather than the argument itself. Making ad hominems is an unviable and deceptive rhetorical strategy.
Men didn't build it for the benefit of other men. They built it for their families, their wives, their sons, their daughters. In fact, they've actually done studies on this. Men have an out-group bias. Women were oppressed in history, but so were men. It's not.
As the host then points out, it's interesting that she asks how, in this context, when she herself doesn't want to define how. Once again, it's entirely possible to disagree with both claims, but still recognize her hypocrisy.
No, because that wasn't taught in school.
With this statement, she unwillingly suggests where she gets all the loaded buzzwords from. The education system, a system with so little true diversity that students presuppose what they should be attempting to prove. As a result, their arguments are often circular. What I say is true because this book says it's true, or what I say is true because it's self-evident that it's true.
Oh my God, Brian.
What is your definition of oppression?
I don't know really how to explain it, to be honest. But I'm just
you use the word, you ought to know how to define it if you just use the word.
Yeah, I just don't know exactly how to, why do you want me to explain that?
Before this podcast, she had about 4 hours to explain it. Still, she resorts to the same diversion tactics. Now she's countering his question with another question, which is recognized as a major deceptive tactic, to postpone the answer for as long as possible, for self-interest. Next, it's time for another diversion tactic, pretending that the host is the bad guy for daring to ask a question.
That's what I'm getting.
Well, you've used a word, you ought to be able to...
Yeah, you're just putting me on the spot. You just want to embarrass me. And I'm to tell you this now, it's not going to happen, Brian. Because guess what? I'll dip right now.
Because we're having a polite conversation?
Because it's not my job to school you and educate you, Brian.
2 times she says his name in a derogatory fashion. The tactic of saying someone's first name is used to establish hierarchy. It's used to assert dominance over the other speaker. Tom Cruise can tell you more about that.
Matt, you have to understand this.
This was not against her will, though.
Matt,
This wasn't against Brooke's will.
Matt, I'm asking you a question. All it does is mask the problem, Matt. She doesn't understand in the same way that you don't understand it, Matt.
That's why doctors, CEOs, and salespeople are trained to say the first names of their patients, employees, and clients. It simulates closeness, and they use this closeness to have the upper hand in conversations. Next, things are about to get uncomfortable and even more immature.
Well, that's a very
And I'm not going to
convenient...
say anything else, and I'm going to stay quiet now.
That's a very convenient way to shut down a otherwise polite conversation. I gave you an opportunity to speak, so I think you should. You're just not going to talk? Why is this such a sensitive subject for you?
Because...
But let me ask you a question. Can we engage in this?
I don't want to, Brian.
Hold on.
I didn't even want to come
Stop
here
interrupting.
in the first place.
Yet she's there, so she did want to be there. Unlike what she says, of course. But I think we're used to that by now.
You literally asked me to be here. I said no thanks. And you're like, come on.
I guess she goes by the saying, when all else fails, make it sound like you don't want the free attention that going on a popular podcast gives you. A saying that's self-contradictory, because free attention is the primary motivation for going on the podcast in the first place. She continues to make it sound like the host is mean for holding her accountable, and makes her feel uncomfortable. So she goes from being strong enough to make big and discriminatory claims to being fragile all of a sudden. Sure.
Why would I have to explain it to you, Brian? Just be respectful. I'm not gonna say anything more about it because I feel uncomfortable talking about it.
Why?
Because it's coming from a place of hate.
Hold on.
Another vague but popular buzzword, hate, which is popular because it's vague. It's a word you can throw at anyone who doesn't think like you do, or mildly challenges you, like in this conversation. Next, she continues the insults, hammering the position she's given herself above the host and the audience, and she makes 3 deceptive appeals to honesty.
The purpose of a debate is not necessarily to convince the other person, it's to convince the viewer, the listener. But it's just interesting because I gave you a minute, 2 minutes to explain your position, and then when I push back a little bit, you're like, no, we're done.
Yeah, because I don't have the time, and Brian, it's so late. I have a long drive back home, and honestly, I don't want to argue right now. To be honest, maybe if you brought it up a little bit sooner, I'm kind of worn out, to be honest.
Well, she's not being honest though. We're now able to know that she's been using these appeals to honesty deceptively throughout the interaction. She started with saying that she didn't want to explain herself because what she said was self-evident, which was circular reasoning. She then resorted to ad hominems and claims that the topic made her uncomfortable. And we certainly wouldn't want her to be uncomfortable in a debate where you kind of have to explain yourself. And now she's tired and it's late. At least 3 different reasons for diverting from the issue. We also know she's being deceptive when she says,
to be honest, maybe if you brought it up like a little bit sooner.
Because it has been brought up sooner. She's had 2 entire podcasts to explain. And somehow, I don't think a 3rd time's going to be the charm. These excerpts show us what it's like to interact with someone who's being deceptive. The only right thing to do in a situation like this is to avoid mirroring the ad hominems and other diversion tactics of the deceptive person. It's about keeping your focus on the substance or lack thereof of what's being said. Deceptive people want you to lose focus and control. They want you to be as emotional as they are. So the thing that annoys them the most is when you remain calm and keep it factual.